Let's just
Mhm.
talk about one last player here, and that's Keldon Johnson for the Sixth Man of the Year race. So Keldon, per DraftKings, has moved into the front runner spot here now. For a long time it was Jaime Hawkins Jr. or Nas Reed. So now Keldon is at minus 180, the favorite to win Sixth Man of the Year with 2 weeks to go here in the season. Jaime Hawkins Jr. has fallen to second at plus 350. Reed Shepard is now at plus 900 at third, and now Nas Reed has actually fallen all the way to fourth at plus 1200. So I put a bunch of they've all actually already met the 65 game rule limit. Keldon though is the player who has played in every game this season. I've wondered if the Spurs are going to give him some rest nights, but apparently he gave an interview yesterday where he basically said he wants to finish out the year playing every game this year. So maybe the Spurs will let him continue to play in every game. Looking at their box score stats, which is their game score, they're all pretty close, pretty similar. The only player who sticks out here is Jaime Hawkins Jr. The net points metric does rate Keldon as the best player amongst these players, where he's at a plus 2.9. The others are all at 0.4 or 0.7. Cleaning the glasses differential model does hurt Keldon in the fact that I think because he plays off the bench, he's not playing a lot with Victor as much. So that number, he's at a minus 3.8, the worst amongst these four players. Same thing for Crafted NBA's plus minus model. He's at a minus 0.5. Again, probably because he plays on the bench, play with a lot of second units. But one thing where Keldon really has the advantage here is in wins, just the fact that the Spurs, of course, are very good, but then he's also played in every game. He's contributed to every single one of these 56 wins in a way because he's been on the floor for all of these games. So just, now that the Spurs have secured a top two record, in my opinion, I think that this has kind of solidified his case as, the front runner for Sixth Man of the Year. And then the fact that he's had some really strong games here in these last few weeks, especially against Miami here, where he went against Jaime Hawkins Jr. So what are your thoughts on Keldon's Sixth Man of the Year race?
Yeah, so when I heard that differential, I immediately went to Data Baller, which is a site that both of us really like. And I went to their Wowie page to see kind of like looking at Wemby and Keldon and when they're on the floor and off the floor. Keldon is going to have like a pretty bad net rating on off just because Wemby is such an on off monster. And so Keldon has played 963 minutes without Wemby, and he's played 558 minutes with Wemby. So that's a big difference. A lot of his minutes are kind of being quote unquote penalized in that way. But when Keldon's on the court without Wemby, the Spurs are still a net plus 2.5 in their net rating. So that's still a good team. Like that's still a playoff team if that was actually something throughout the whole year. With Keldon and Wemby together, the team is a plus 12.9 in those minutes. So that's really good. It's not quite as good as Wemby with Keldon off, but some of these numbers I think will get skewed a little bit for Keldon just because of the fact that like he's kind of mirroring Wemby in his minutes a little bit. But I think, again, this is where it gets kind of tough because how do you measure like this guy, heart and soul has been brought up a lot. And I know that Sixth Man of the Year is a little bit different than MVP, where it's kind of like raw counting stats. Like, oh, you scored a bunch of points, here's the award. But I also think there's something about Keldon and what he brings to the team that even makes the team better when he's not on the court. And how do you measure that in something like that? I do think that the fact that the Spurs are going to have such a better record than these other three teams will probably secure the deal for him. I think if it was close, it might be hard when you have a situation like Jaime Hawkins, who's putting up a lot of production. Like now, how do you weigh the stats with Keldon's impact? That's where I think it would get a lot tougher. But they are up like, 19 games on the Heat. So I think that kind of overwrites that differential a little bit. And so I think, because he's less of a production guy, and he does have big production sometimes, but he's able to pick his spots and do it when the team needs it versus every game in and out. But because he is more of that like intangible sort of player who's bringing something to the team that's more than just points, now that he has the like odds-on favorite to win it, I also don't see how he could give it up, because if he doesn't have a whole lot of production in these last 9 games or whatever, like who cares? That's not really his role all the time anyway. So it's hard to see, like, if Jaime Hawkins was in the front, but then he had 8 stinkers in a row, that could hurt his case more than it could for Keldon. So I think both the total wins, but also the way that Keldon makes his case kind of insulate him a little bit now that he is the favorite, and the Spurs are the second seed at worst. And honestly, they're not too far away from clinching the second best record league wide. So, I think all those things go into his case. Now that he's a favorite, I just don't see how Jaime Hawkins can overtake him.
Yeah, for sure. And I know one thing I didn't mention about Keldon, just the efficiency monster that he is. I mean, just he knows, I'm either scoring at the rim and I'm going to score at the rim, or, if he needs to, if he has to take a, corner three or an above the break three, he will take it, but, pretty efficiently as well. So